Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so happy you can join us today. Primary election is Tuesday, June 6th here in New Jersey. This is the election that will select the candidates who will run in the general election for the state Senate and Assembly here in New Jersey in November. Standing by, we have Republican strategist and president of Marathon Public Affairs, Jeanette Hoffman. She's coming up. First, though, Micah Rasmussen is standing by. He is the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Micah joins us now. It's good to see you.
You too, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, you're having a lot going on at Rider with students graduating, and after students graduate and we get down to the shore, the next thing in New Jersey is a big election coming up. The entire state Senate and Assembly are up. Every seat for grabs, 120 seats, but the primary, it happens in June, so school's ending. People are thinking of vacation and maybe not voting, so what are you expecting as far as low turnout goes for the primary?
It's a low turnout situation. Of any of the 4 years in our election cycle, presidential, gubernatorial, Congress, the one where the state legislature is the top of the ticket is the lowest interest level. So that'll go in November, that'll apply to, and it'll apply even more so on the primaries. We'll be lucky if we get 10 or 12% of the vote turning out of eligible voters. So far of the early vote, we're a month out, there are about 150,000 votes that have come in by mail. Okay. So it's a low interest affair. And when that happens, that means that a smaller group of committed, highly energized, maybe ideological voters can make a bigger difference in their races.
Because people will complain, oh, well, there aren't any good candidates in the election when November's rolling around, but they're not voting in the primaries. So why doesn't that message resonate with voters, or is that by design from some other people who may want to get certain candidates on the ballot for November?
That's a really good question, Laura. And I would say that primary elections are either ratifying the party's choice of who they think are going to be the best candidates, and the party chairs have taken a look, and the party committee people have taken a look, and they're giving you their best advice and their best recommendations, and they're giving them preferential party line treatment on the ballot. And you're supposed to verify their choices, in which case that probably is an understandable thing that not a lot of people come out and vote. Or voters are getting to choose between really ideological Republicans and maybe more mainstream Republicans, or on the flip side, progressives or more moderate Democrats. So we get a little bit of both, but certainly there's not a lot of interest in running against the organization candidates on the Democratic side. There are very few primaries going on. There are a few more on the Republican side. They're having a bit more of that struggle for the heart of the party, and the give and the pull and the take between the Trump side of things and the more moderate side of things.
Are there any races that you're looking at, keeping an eye on for the primary?
Senator Cody versus Senator Gill. They've been thrown into the same district by redistricting. Only one's going to get out of this primary. And it certainly looks like Senator Cody, former governor, guy with enormous statewide profile. Nia Gill has been a progressive in her own right, very much a battle-hardened warrior of the state legislature, but it looks like Cody's going to get out of this one. And so not a lot of surprises on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, there are two big ones in South Jersey. There's whether Ed Durr is going to be renominated. His running mate is running against him. Fred Madden's seat in the 4th District, just next door in Gloucester County, is being hotly contested by two Republicans. And then there are a couple of races in Northwest New Jersey, Joe Panaccio versus Tom Mastrangelo, and some other races up there that are interesting. Betty Lou DeCroce would like to get back into the legislature. So again, these maybe 4 races out of 40 on the Republican side that are pretty interesting.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the governor's role? How involved does a sitting governor get in the primary? Do they sit out supporting candidates? Like, what's the role, especially, given Governor Phil Murphy doesn't have to run again for governor, and now we know that Joe Biden is running for president, it doesn't like he's going to throw his hat in the ring. So what can you say about the governor's role?
just like when the president has a midterm election, we're going to be following closely to see whether this is a referendum on Phil Murphy, just like last year was a referendum on Joe Biden. He exceeded expectations in last year's midterm elections. Democrats did better than we usually expect them to do in a midterm. The question is whether or not Democrats will continue to lose ground. You have to remember, Democrats have had the majority in the state legislature in New Jersey since 2001. Very, very long run. But they have started to erode those majorities a little bit. Republicans claw back a seat or two in every election. The question is, can they extend that lead? The governor has not waged a very active role in the primaries. I suspect because there haven't been a lot of hotbed primary races on the Democratic side. It doesn't mean that legislators are either going to be looking for him to be involved in November, or maybe you're going to say, you know what, sixth year of the governor, a little bit of fatigue maybe setting in. Approval ratings getting a little soft. He's still doing okay. Don't get me wrong. He's above water, but maybe not as strong as they once were. Let's stand on our own 2 feet here. He'll be invited. But it'll be on the basis of popular issues that he has championed, whether he's talking about minimum wage or whether he's talking about the legalization of marijuana, things that people really know him for.
25 to 15, 25 Democrats in the Senate, 15 Republicans. So there's more room and the Senate side to close that gap. And you said that is kind of expected in a governor's midterm, and that's looking
right.
to November.
That's right. We'll be looking at other races come November. For example, Vin Gopal's district in the 11th in Monmouth County is going to be a real hotbed. Republicans are contesting that strongly. He is preparing very aggressively. So that'll be one to watch, whether or not he can ward off a challenge from Steve Dinistrian, whether or not the Republican Assembly people who won 2 years ago can win again. Vin is going to be trying to get his running mates in to knock off those Republican incumbents. So we'll see what happens there. But we will be looking at some other races. The 16th, where Senator Andrew Zwicker is, Republicans are going to contest that heavily with Mike Pappas, and we'll see what happens there. But you will be looking at some other races come the general election where Republicans have to do well if they're going to claw back a little bit of the majority. I think 25 to 15 is a big, big spread to cover in one election. You might look at them winning, 1 or 2 additional seats if they can. They'll be doing well, but getting back all the majority is probably a tall order.
Are there any particular issues that seem to be driving the primaries, and then also looking ahead to November?
I think that there are conservative Republican voters who want to make these cultural issues a big part of turnout. So school board races, sex ed curriculum, vaccine requirements, things like this that they think motivate their base. Now, interestingly enough, if you're a Democrat, you're going to want to run more on issues like abortion, right? You have Donald Trump, really, he's not running in this race in New Jersey this year, but he's saying, I'm the one who killed Roe versus Wade. Well, that's never going to play well in New Jersey. And to the extent that Democrats can hang that albatross around Republicans' neck, that will be a winning issue for them. They would love to run on an issue like abortion. The big gun control decision that came down very recently, by the federal judge who struck down our concealed carry laws. That can be an issue where you say, well, look, this is the Trump Supreme Court that has struck down these restrictions that have been widely, uniformly agreed upon in New Jersey. There's been a lot of consensus around our restrictions around gun violence for a long period of time. Now those restrictions are all out the door. People are going to be allowed to carry in places that we're not expecting them to carry. To the extent that that's something that can be talked about or hung around Republicans' neck, that can be a tricky issue for them as well. So you'll have these sort of guns and abortion, which is a traditional Democratic issue in New Jersey. These are issues that Democrats have won on for a long time. On the Republican side, they're going to be trying to talk about sort of these cultural conservative issues.
As a consumer of election campaigns and somebody who's going to go out to vote, is the voting, that access to information, is that changing?
Oh, it is changing, absolutely, Laura. You are one of the few, as you know, who's paying attention to and drilling down on New Jersey politics in a way that, look, you were part of a press corps in New Jersey that was the largest press corps, the largest state house press corps in the country at the time. There were, 75 reporters who were covering New Jersey politics on a daily basis. That's not happening anymore, and so there's a real dearth of information. I had a colleague ask me recently to help her figure out what the issues were and what the positions were of the candidates in her town. It was impossible to find that out. There was no local newspaper that was covering that issue anymore, no local reporters who were covering that issue anymore. And so, you had to go and you had to really scour their social media and find out what you could and try to glean positions. It's harder, I think, to be an informed voter at this point, especially when it comes to more localized races.
From a reporter's perspective, some of the issues of, people getting elected and lying throughout the election is because there aren't those local reporters, boots on the ground, breaking it down and presenting it to the people from a reliable source where you can say, oh, okay, I know what this person represents. I know what they've reported before. Yep. Yes, I find this trustworthy, or no, I may not find that person so trustworthy.
So you're stuck with then two competing positions, what the candidates want to present to you, the choice they want to offer you, they want to give you. And that's fine, that's good enough. But we can't really challenge those and see those for ourselves to the extent that that information isn't available or that it's harder to find. You've got to go and you've got to look up bills or you've got to file Oprah requests. That's a really tricky thing to expect voters to take that level of interest and that level of time to scour information for themselves and come up with that information for themselves. It's a situation that I hope will continue to evolve and continue to change, but so far it's really not going in the direction we would want for higher information voters. I think it's harder to be a higher information voter these days.
Oh, for certain. Well, Micah, we thank you for taking the time to talk with us and break down some of the information that we need to know for the upcoming primary. So Micah Rasmussen, Rebovich Institute for Politics at Rider, thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Talking about the upcoming primary election in New Jersey coming up in June, and there are some interesting races that could impact the makeup of the state Senate and Assembly. So let's bring in Republican strategist and president of Marathon Public Affairs, Jeanette Hoffman. Jeanette, it's so good to see you.
Thanks, Laura. It's always great to see you, and thank you for having me on today.
Oh, I'm happy to have you on. So June 6th is the primary, and probably it's some of the lowest turnout, especially because it's an off-year election. The legislature's at the top of the ticket. So can you talk a little bit about how you see voter excitement or lack thereof impacting the results in June?
Yeah, well, you said it. I mean, primary elections are traditionally low turnout, but with a legislative election year, it's even lower turnout. So we expect around like 30% to show up in the general election for the legislative top of the ticket. It's even less when there's a primary election. That being said, there are some hotly contested primaries all around the state. Republicans are very excited this year because we have a fresh, new, really redrawn map for the legislative seats, and we think we can take back the legislature from the Democrats. So you're going to see a lot of races that are hotly contested in the primary up in Northwest Morris County, down in South Jersey, in Gloucester, Salem counties. And, with such low turnout, these are going to be really grassroots competitive campaigns. And it's really anybody's guess who's going to pull these wins out.
Right. So in the Assembly, you've got the Democrats 45, Republicans 34. The Senate, I believe it's 25 or 24 because there's an open seat to 15 Republicans. So where do you see the more likely? Because it's Governor Phil Murphy's midterm, really.
Yes.
Where do you see the Republicans are poised to make the most gains? Senate, Assembly, both?
I think both. I mean, look at 2021 when Phil Murphy was on the top of the ticket. Republicans picked up a number of seats, 7 seats to be exact, when it was under that 2021 old map that was really not favorable to Republicans at all. So now we're looking at a lot of retirements in the Senate and in the Assembly. In South Jersey, Fred Madden in District 4, he's the Democratic senator that's retiring. He's leaving an open seat. Republicans are very excited to take that back. District 3 is really competitive in Salem and Gloucester County. And then in the middle of the state in Mercer County in District 14, Dan Benson, who's a Democrat in the Assembly, he's leaving to become Mercer County executive. He's running for that seat. So that leaves a space for Republicans. Republicans hope they can take that back. That's kind of a swing district, but we haven't picked up that seat in a long time. Then up around Hunterdon County in District 16, there's an open seat because a Democratic Assemblywoman is leaving. She's not seeking re-election. So that's another place for Republicans to pick up. And then there's places, all around the state that have made Republican gains. Up in Bergen County, suburban Bergen County, Senator Joe Lagana has barely squeaked out his last election. So Republicans look to be competitive there. So, I think this looks like a great year for Republicans. They have a very strong message. People aren't really happy with the high property taxes in this state. So I think we have a really great message going into it. Affordability is going to be a number one message for Republicans up and down the state. So I think we're very excited this year.
All right, that was kind of leading to my next question. Is there an overall theme that you're going to be hearing, or is it going to be really more about what's happening at the most local level?
I think it's a little bit of both. As I said, affordability. Democrats have been in charge for far too long, and this state just keeps getting more expensive to live and raise a family. A lot of our school districts have had state aid taken away, so that means we've had to pay for it in the form of higher property taxes. So I think you're going to hear Republicans talk about that a lot, that Democrats have done nothing to make New Jersey a better state to live and raise a family. And then I think there's going to be also a lot of local issues up and down the state that candidates talk about, because as you know, all politics are local. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. But I also think schools and education are going to be a number one issue, as they always are, Laura.
Right. Well, exactly, because that's where property taxes go to fund the schools, and people are, let's talk about that. I mean, since the pandemic, people have become more and more vocal about what is happening in their schools. Some people are very upset, and then there is a lot of misinformation out there, making it hard sometimes for voters, and sometimes voters will to weed through all of the noise, and then people say, well, you know what, they're just no good. They're no good candidates, and then they don't end up going to vote. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that people are tired of both sides and tired of politicians. I think a new Fairleigh Dickinson poll came out that said 80% of New Jersey voters think politicians are corrupt. So that's frustrating. It's disheartening. I think people should listen to candidates on both sides and not get discouraged. And I think, it's really important that you really take time to listen and become engaged, because there is a lot of disinformation out on social media. I'll put the blame right there. But, I do think one good thing that has come out of the pandemic is people are really taking more of an interest in what's going on in their local schools. We've seen more people run for school board than ever before. And I think that's due to some of the changes in the curriculum that has really gotten people a little bit upset about some of the sex ed changes in the curriculum and introducing some concepts for children that maybe not are age appropriate. So I think more engagement is good, especially at the hyper local level in school board elections.
Right. And I guess it's yet to be seen how many people will actually show up at those local elections, because it is June and people, school is is out, people are starting to go on their vacations, so it is typically lower turnout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that's why, turnout is key. So working on a campaign, your job really in the last couple of weeks is turning out your voters. So, it can make, 10 voters can make a difference between a winning and losing primary campaign, because as you said, it's, the last week of school, people are on vacation, kids are getting out of school, people are preoccupied with proms, with graduation. I'm ready for my son's prom coming up,
right.
But, everybody has lots of things to do. So, turnout is key. Great campaigns know how to turn out their voters. Right. And it'll be interesting to watch, the razor thin margins in some of these primary races.
Well, and can you talk a little bit about what you learned from 2021? Because so many people were surprised that Phil Murphy didn't win in a landslide. It was a lot closer. So are Republicans thinking, hey, you know what? We really are within striking distance more than people may be giving us credit for?
Oh yeah. No, listen, there was so much voter frustration out there with Murphy and the Democrats and, the costs, the mandates, the, not having control over our kids' education. So I think, Republicans were smart and they were right to tap into that voter frustration and put forward an agenda that, puts people first, puts homeowners first, puts, you know, parents first. And I think that's the kind of agenda that you're going to see Republicans talking about up and down the state during these legislative elections. Because really, I think they're feeling frustrated that, decades of Democratic control hasn't gotten New Jerseyans really anywhere in the state.
And the Democrats have had control of the legislature since 2001, and often the pendulum swings one way or the other. But there are some pretty, it's double-digit numbers that Democrats have a majority in the Senate and Assembly. So, how much do you think that you'll be able to close that gap? And how much will we know from the primary? Because some elections we know in the primary, okay, well, that's going to decide what happens in the general election.
Yeah, I think you're going to pretty much know. You'll know who the candidates are in the primary, and then some of the really Republican primaries will be decided, and that'll be the general. Because right in Morris County, you're probably going to have a safe seat. In Essex County, where Dick Cody is running against Nia Gill, because they're both sitting senators who got redistricted, whoever wins that primary is going to win the general, right? It's a very Democratic seat. And the same with the Morris County seat, where Joe Panaccio is running against Tom Mastrangelo. So those seats will basically be decided in the primary election. But I think, I think it's going to be really competitive. I think the Democrats are scared. I think we could take back one or both houses. It's not impossible to do. I remember, and I know you remember, Laura, a time when there was a 2020 split in the state Senate. And it was a very unique time in New Jersey's history. And, I've heard rumblings that could happen again as well.
Well, and that's the thing about New Jersey. It's, that could never happen, right? Before we had a lieutenant governor, what are the chances that our governor is going to leave and then the Senate president, and then this is going to happen where it goes all the way down to, I think the attorney general and motor vehicles had was governor for an hour during that insane time after Jim McGreevey left and before Cody and John Bennett were sworn in. I mean, never say never in New Jersey, because this is New Jersey, and there, as predictable as it is, there's a lot of unpredictable things that do happen.
Yes, and I think you're right. Anything can happen in New Jersey. And that crazy time of rotating lieutenant governors, I think, was the impetus to create the law to give us a permanent lieutenant governor. And Kim Guadagno was our first one. Now we have Sheila Oliver. And I think that was a good decision, because that was certainly an unpredictable time in New Jersey's history. So, never say never. We could have a 2020 split once again.
Right. And with this, again, it's kind of Governor Murphy's midterm, even though we know he won't be running for re-election. We have term limits in New Jersey. And we know Phil Murphy's not going to be running for president. So can you talk a little bit about how this election is going to kind of tee up the upcoming gubernatorial election in 2 years?
Well, as far as I can tell, it seems like people are already running for governor in New Jersey.
Right. It seems like it.
And the Republican side, because this is going to be the first open seat in quite a while, because there's no incumbent running. Governor Murphy's term limited. So on the Republican side, you have Jack Ciattarelli, who the day after he lost to Governor Murphy said, I'm still running. So he's basically still been running. He's been running for governor, since he ran in the primary against Kim Guadagno years back. So he's been basically running for a very long time. Then, Bill Spadea, who's the radio host of New Jersey 101.5, he's formed, this Common Sense Club, which is an apparatus for him to get around, and he's really been making the rounds. Now, he's not a declared candidate. He's still a radio host. He can't be both. But a lot of people are saying he's making all the right moves as a gubernatorial candidate would be doing.
Yeah.
And then there's other people like Senator John Bramnick. He might throw his hat in the ring. We don't know. Senator Mike Testa from Cumberland County on the Republican side. We don't know if he's going to run. Who knows? It's really early. But on the Democratic side, we also have Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. Steve Fulop is a declared candidate for governor, Jersey City mayor, and some other names too out there. So it should be interesting to see, because the big race is New Jersey governor, because that governorship has probably one of the most powerful seats in the entire country.
Right. And I wonder if the race for governor, because again, Senate and Assembly, a lot of times it doesn't get a lot of media play, if the candidates will use this to their advantage and get involved in some of those races to try and see how certain things play in this election, and use that as a monitor, as a guide as to what they're going to do and say as they're leading into 2025.
Yeah, actually, Laura, that's really interesting that you said that, because Bill Spadea is already kind of picking sides in some of these primaries, which, I think New Jersey Globe Joey Fox kind of speculated, is that a good move or is that a bad move? Because some of these primary races, he could pick losers, right? Or it could be a good risk, because then he could engender some favors from some of these candidates. And, already we're seeing some of these, these county chairs picking sides. So it should be interesting to see who gets involved in these Senate and Assembly races.
Right.
And,
right.
If it pays off.
Yeah, and I wonder if the governor will get involved. I mean, because at this point, where does he have to go? Because he's not going to be running for president. He's term limited. So I wonder if he will be involved at all in the midterms.
Yeah, well, it seems like he's this PAC that he started to run for president or higher office seems to have a lot of money in it. So one would think he would spread the wealth to his friends in the Democratic Party, but we shall see.
Yep. All right. Well, never a dull moment. Jeanette Hoffman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the upcoming primary and then the next general election. And we're always looking ahead to the next election in New Jersey. It's good seeing you.
It's so great to be with you, Laura.
All right. Thank you. And we thank you for joining us on New Jersey Politics. I'm Laura Jones. We'll see you back here next time.